I also love the hymn, We Laugh, We Cry. It was written by Unitarian Universalist Shelley Jackson Denham. And it has songs about change. Its lyrics include such lines as, we laugh, we cry, we live, we die. A child is born among us and we feel a certain glow. The death of one among us fills us all with pain and grief. And we seek elusive answers to the questions of this life. Change is unavoidable. From the time we are born to the time we die, the right answers are elusive because every time we get new answers, we find new questions because the conditions and situations are always evolving. But one thing that helps us through is community. We have found a time, a need, and a place to be together. And by doing so, we have found a joy being together. But what holds us together? Denham's answer is that we believe in life and the strength of love. A love so strong that holds us together even through the questions. The questioning spirit is what makes this song uniquely UU. Even to question is an answer. Up to the point of the fourth verse, this song could be sung by any close group. Any club, fraternity, congregation, or family might sing this song. A group that feels that they have the same answers to the same questions can feel a bond of love and camaraderie. There is a sense of belonging in both right-wing and left-wing political parties. Both affirm their own definitions of life and love. But the question is seldom an answer. Party members demand loyalty over thoughtfulness. And many religions expect adherence to dogma more than independent thought. So how do we, a tradition of infidels, freethinkers, heretics, and creative people, form a cohesive group? Historically, the answer is not very well. But our questing spirit allows us to try and try again. We give ourselves freedom to fail and the opportunity to do better. Unitarianism and Universalism were separate faiths. They began in the 18th and 19th century as Christian denominations. Over the centuries, they evolved. In addition to Christianity, they began to include world religions and secular philosophies. By 1961, they found they had more in common with each other than they did with traditional Christianity. And they merged to form a new faith called Unitarian Universalism. Here is the 1961 Statement of Purpose. In accordance with these corporate purposes, the members of the Unitarian Universalist Association, dedicated to the principles of a free faith, unite in seeking to strengthen one another in a free and disciplined search for truth as the foundation of our religious fellowship. 2, to cherish and spread the universal truths taught by the great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, summarized memorably in the Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man. 3, to affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality and dignity of man, and the use of the democratic method in human relationships. 4, to implement our vision of one world by striving for world community founded on the ideals of brotherhood, justice, and peace. 5, to serve the needs of member churches and fellowships, to organize new churches and fellowships, and to extend and strengthen liberal religion. And 6, to encourage cooperation with men of goodwill in every land. By the 1980s, probably before that, for many people, these words felt outdated. The men of 1961 used exclusionary language even in their attempt to be inclusive. With the rise of feminism, words like brotherhood, men of goodwill, dignity of man felt exclusionary of half the population on the planet, over half the population. Also, by 1985, they felt the need to separate the organizational purposes, like, hey, we want to build churches, from the basic principles. And so the purposes became a preamble, and the principles took center stage. The 7 principles, which are on your order of service. And are briefly summarized, they are human worth and dignity, equity, acceptance and encouragement, free and responsible search for meaning, democracy, world peace, and interdependence. The 1961 document only specifically listed the Judeo-Christian tradition as a source. So between 1985 and 92, they added transcendentalism, paganism, humanism, world religions, plus words and deeds of prophetic women and men. And all of this was included in Article II of the UUA bylaws. And this is the Unitarianism that I joined in 1987. I wanted more than my liberal Presbyterianism offered. This faith was expansive, creative, and inclusive. And they were so resistant to dogma that even the stated in Article II that the purposes needed to be reviewed every 20 years. In 2005, most UUs felt that the 7 principles were just fine, thank you. And there were no proposed changes that got any traction within the movement. But over the years, since then, there's been several things. There's been proposals about making every worth of every human into every being, which would create a whole different idea of what that is. There's been a proposed 8th principle, which emphasizes anti-racism work. And there's been and in the sources, people were saying, well, you didn't say anything about Islam. Well, you didn't say anything about, secular psychology. You did, there's all, so that there was a list, they kept on wanting to add more. And so people were starting to just propose all sorts of changes. And so the commission was called back into existence, the Article II Commission, 2 years ago. And one of the things that has prompted this has been that over these since 1985, we have been advocating for change in the areas of sexism, heterosexism, and racism. And we as a denomination have made quite large advances. The majority of our clergy are now women. There's been inclusiveness of gay and lesbian and transgendered people that is continuing to grow. What we have done less well is with people of color. This denomination is becoming older and whiter, while America is growing younger and more multicultural. And we need to change in order to survive. If we do not change, we will become smaller and smaller and less relevant. And I have loved Unitarian Universalism for over 35 years. And why shouldn't I? It was built for me. As a white male college graduate, it allowed me to continue to be a hippie right up to the age of retirement. But as an aging boomer, I must listen to the needs of Generation X, Millennials, and Generation Z. Otherwise, the denomination I love will become increasingly irrelevant. At General Assembly, there's lots of great excitement about the rewriting of the purposes and principles, which I hold so dear. I even wrote song for each principle that we sometimes play here. And the badge that the young people and some of the older people were wearing was 21st Century UU. And boy, that really hit home when I heard that was the tag. Because it was like, I was being told, oh, you're so 20th century. and I am. But I want my denomination to go into the 21st and the 22nd century. So over the past 2 years, the study commission has been taking input from Unitarian Universalists and have drafted a new statement of UU values. It's posted on the website, the UUA website, and available for comment for the next few months. And you have inserts in your order of service that give you information. You can even go to a couple of meetings, either one this afternoon on Monday, where you can Zoom in and have some conversation with others who are struggling with how do we make the right changes. And they will take these suggestions and they will create a final draft or a draft that will be voted on at 2023 in GA. And if it doesn't pass, they'll probably go back to the drawing board. If it does pass, it'll spend another year of getting scrutinized and picked apart and wordsmithed as you use. If you've ever been on a committee, and I saw how many hands of people have been on committee, you know, this wordsmithing stuff is tough. And it's even tougher when you're bringing it in from nationwide. And so by 2024, we probably will have something new. It may not be in the form that I share with you today, and it may not be in the form of the 7 principles. Something will change, because change is in the air. And I encourage you to make your voice heard. Let them know the changes you like and the changes you don't. Suggest changes that they have yet to conceive. Our faith is not handed down from on high. It is something we create as a community. So now I will read the draft of the proposed Article II. And I'll offer a few comments, but I want you to think of the changes and how this makes you feel, as well as how it makes you think, and where you want our denomination to go. Section C 2.1. Purposes of the Unitarian Association shall devote its resources and exercise its organizational powers for religious, educational, and humanitarian purposes. Its primary purposes are to equip congregations for vital ministries, to support and train leaders, both lay and professional, to heal historic inequities, and to advance our Unitarian Universalist values in the world. We will transform the world by our liberating love. Up until the last sentence, that was standard 501c3 language. This is what we do mechanically. But it ends that last statement of we will transform the world by our liberating love. And for me, the thing that, being so happy with the 7 principles, I never saw any dissatisfaction with them other than that they might be too wordy. But until someone said, you know, nowhere in our 7 principles does the word love appear. And I went, wow, that's an omission. Because that's all I've experienced in UU congregations, for the most part, is love. Even amidst the struggles, there's been love. Section C22, the values and covenant. This is the meat of the document. Love is the enduring force that holds us together. As Unitarian Universalists in religious community, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist each other in engaging our ministries. We draw from our heritage of freedom and reason, hope and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love inspires and empowers the passion in which we embody our values, inseparable from one another. These shared values are justice, generosity, evolution, pluralism, equity, and interdependence. I use my fingers because the numbers aren't in the document. From here on, the document goes on to define each of these words mean. And so one of the things that I like about this is that there's one word, and you have one word and then the definition. And so like when the 7 principles, I thought one of their weaknesses was that each one was paragraphs with subclauses. And so with the 7 principles and writing the songs, especially for RE, but for us older people, I put one word to each of the principles. So when the people ask me, what was Unitarian Universalist? And I would say, humanity, sharing spirituality, a thoughtful democracy for peace and ecology. So I could give people one sentence instead of the usual, what do you do at your church? Well, I don't really know. which is our typical answer. So I like that there's a sentence that says, these are our values. It goes on to talk about those values. And they also talk about, as well as the value, they follow each value with a covenant. And one of the critiques of the 8th principle is, it didn't sound like the other 7 principles because it had all this language about accountability, which made it longer than the other principles and stuff like that, because it just didn't feel the same. And the thought was, that's really not a problem with the 8th principle that's proposed. It's the problem with the 7 principles, that we have never had language that holds ourselves accountable to what we say. So this is an effort so these are longer than the principles, but it's an effort to try to make us really take it seriously and actually do what we say. Justice. We work to be a diverse, multicultural, beloved community where all people thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism in all forms of oppression within individuals and our institutions. We are accountable to each other for this work. This value of justice carries forward what is in the 2nd and 6th principle, plus language from the proposed 8th principle. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely share our faith, presence, and resources. Compassionate generosity connects us with one another in relationships of mutuality. Generosity. Now I swear the finance committee didn't tell me to slip this in. This is actually in the document. And I remember that hearing a thing early in my ministry is when they said, well, what can you preach about? And it says, Unitarians are happy to go to forbidden topics like sex and politics, but don't you dare talk about money. But money is just only a part of generosity. It's trying to cultivate a whole spirit of that we are in this together. and we each give what we can. Evolution. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Evolution is fundamental to life and to our Universalist and Unitarian heritage. Never complete and never perfect. Now, this value surprised me when I was attending GA last summer when we held it here in the sanctuary and we streamed it in live. Because of evolution. And the first thing I thought of was that son of a Unitarian minister, Charles Darwin. I said, well, that's kind of nice. But what they mean more is about to continue evolution and to embrace change, that even to question is an answer. Now, as a writer, I would have put this one at the end of the documents to basically say, okay, once we vote for this document, realize that we're going to be changing it down the road too. Because we are not a faith that stands still. We are not a faith that looks back to ancient texts and say what somebody believed 2,000 years ago is absolute. We are a denomination that looks to the future and is willing to evolve. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings in a diverse culture, theology, and experience. We covenant to learn from one another and openly explore the depth and breadth of our many wisdoms. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. The value of pluralism borrows some of the language of the fourth principle of a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Plus, it summarizes the spirit of the six sources. And I think in the covenant, it talks about, we're not just going to talk about these things, but how we're going to talk about them. With love, curiosity, and respect. We have conversations to understand each other, not to win a debate and to score points. Equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain a fully inclusive and accessible community of communities. Most UUs, when asked to do the 7 principles, can remember the first, inherent worth and dignity. And there's that language. So that's a touchstone. And I usually, when I talk to UUs about the 7 principles, they remember inherent worth and dignity and interdependent web. 1 and 7, and everything else kind of gets lost in clauses and phraseology. And here's that last principle, interdependence. We honor the sacred interdependent web of all existence. With humility, we understand our place in the web. We covenant to care for and respect the earth and all beings by fostering relationships of mutuality. We work to repair the bonds we have broken. And so this carries forth, this is the closest one-to-one reading between the new values and the 7 principles. And now we come to section 2.3, inspirations. Inspirations. As Unitarian Universalists, we draw upon and are inspired by the full depth and breadth of sacred understanding as experienced by humanity. Grateful for the religious lineages we inherit and the pluralism which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. This inspiration section attempts to summarize what the 6 sources, the sources of our living tradition, on which our hymnal is based. It consciously tried to avoid a list, because once you start a list, someone will raise their hand and say, I don't feel included. Well, this statement, I only feel partially included, and I think my wife might not feel included. When I went online and typed my little suggestions to what I think they should adapt this, I typed in that I wish they would add "and secular," so it would read inspired by the full depth and breadth of sacred and secular understandings. Because I want atheism and humanism to be affirmed and included. And I think if we call everything sacred, even humanism, I know many humanists will say, well, that doesn't really fit what I mean by humanist. It is sacred. So I think we should, that's my little editorial. And I hope all of you go online and put your own editorials in, because there will be somebody who will collate all this stuff and see what we like and we don't like as a denomination. Now these last 2 sections are again more technical sections, but I think C2.4 is inclusion. And it tries to address some of the struggles they've had at the UUA and some of our congregations over the past 10, 15 years. Systems of power, privilege, and oppression have traditionally created barriers for persons and groups with particular identities, ages, abilities, and histories. We pledge to replace such barriers with an ever-widening circles of solidarity and mutual respect. We strive to be an association of congregations that truly welcome all persons who share our values. We commit to structuring congregational and associational life in ways that empower and enhance everyone's participation. And this is critical. And I think even in the changes that this congregation wants to create, we're working on getting an RE director. When we have very few kids, it's one of those, if you build it, they will come situations. And we have to realize the reality of the populations of New Bern. The population that is over 60 is largely white. But the population that is under 30, the parents, and under 20, the children, is going to be much more multicultural. And so we have to become culturally competent so people feel welcomed when they walk through our door. Because it does no good to have people come and say, gosh, I feel icky, or they didn't feel welcome. So we have to be aware that when we are inviting people in who are likely to be cultural different from us, we better be prepared to be welcoming in ways that they view as welcoming. In section C5, the clause that's in our current one, that was in our 1961 document, the freedom of belief clause. Nothing herein shall be deemed to infringe upon the individual freedom of belief which is inherent in the Unitarian Universalist heritages, or to conflict with any statement of purpose, covenant, or bond of union used in any congregation, unless such is used as a creedal test. In expressing our beliefs, we do so in the spirit of love in ways that further beloved community. So some congregations have as their mission statement the 7 principles. They'll still be allowed to do that as their personal manifestation of Unitarianism in their area, as long as they don't make it a creedal test and say you have to believe this or you're out of here, because we don't do creedal tests. And some congregations, about 200 or 300 of our 1,000, have already added an 8th principle to that. The 8th principle, as proposed in 2017, is not going to be in the final document, but these churches who felt that was an important part of their mission will be able to continue it. Our bylaws say we affirm the principles. Doesn't mention which principles, doesn't say the 7 principles. Our bylaws are very vague, which I believe all bylaws should be, because that way you don't have to have congregational votes to change them every year. But we put on to the community as our mission statement. Certainly, hopefully, will not be as long as all of Article II, but will be something that, and Article II, as written now, doesn't seem to have the pithiness or handle that the 7 principles did. And so there was as an evangelical tool, I don't think it's as strong as the 7 principles. As an introspective tool for our spiritual growth, I think it's stronger. So whenever you're going through changes, there's give and take, and you have to kind of say, how do we do that? How do we deal with all that? The importance of these things is not that they're a creed that we have to say we believe or don't, who's in or who's out. They are a focal point for conversation. And just as the 7 principles and 6 sources changed the conversation from what was going on in 1961 to 1985 to now almost 40 years later. I hate thinking that the 80s were 40 years ago, but it's true. That we're going to have new words to center our conversations about. The old words don't disappear, they still inspire. They just aren't in the bylaws, which nobody reads anyway. But we have to, but this struggle of creating language, of saying who we are, that embraces all the wideness that we want to be, yet gives us enough definition to say, yes, we are a cohesive group, is tough work. But I encourage you all to participate in it. And this, the magic of the web gives us things that we couldn't do in 1985. That each one of you can go on and go to the heart of the bureaucracy of our denomination and say, I like this, I don't like that. You forgot totally about this. And let it be heard. And if enough people think as you do, that might make it into the document. That's an opportunity that we didn't have. And it just feels like it makes us 21st century Unitarian Universalists. When we go forward with grace and love.